in this third reading.
Andrew Williams.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. I take a call on behalf of New Zealand First, and this is the third reading of what was originally the Consumer Law Reform Bill, now split into a number of bills that cover the Fair Trading Amendment, Consumer Guarantees Amendment Bill, Weights and Measures Amendment Bill, Second-Hand Dealers and Pawnbrokers Amendment Bill, and also Carriage of Goods Amendment Bill and Auctioneers Bill. So there are now a number of bills that have split out from that Consumer Law Reform Bill. And what better party than New Zealand First to stand in support of consumers, a party that's been in existence for 20 years, standing up for consumer rights and the rights of New Zealand citizens and residents in terms of what they are rightfully owed. And in this respect, we do support this. We've supported this throughout because it is a bill that does ensure the rights of consumers, particularly vulnerable consumers, consumers that may otherwise be put at risk, are protected. In terms of the Consumer Guarantees Amendment Bill, we note that it includes surety around delivery guarantees, so that particularly in the case of people buying over the internet and increasingly more purchasing is being done via electronic means, that there is a delivery guarantee and the recipients are not liable until they have actually received the goods and have signed for them. That's a good thing. It also means that in terms of quality, there are rights of recall here. The Minister can have compulsory recalls on products. Again, that's a worthy inclusion because increasingly there is questionable quality over products as we are seeing more and more products coming on the market of questionable source, of questionable quality, of questionable longevity in terms of their reliability. So again, it is good that we have this option where the Minister can have compulsory recalls on products that may not be up to standard. Also, I note in the Consumer Guarantees Amendment Bill it includes gas and electricity supply. So a guarantee that there will be accessible quality of supply of gas and electricity, and it goes into all the various aspects of that to ensure that consumers are provided with that basic provision in life, electricity and gas, that meets a quality supply situation. It is interesting in regards to that. I wonder how long it will take for many areas of New Zealand to have more undergrounding of power, however, because so many communities around New Zealand continue to have power supplied with overhead wires, and increasingly every time we have a major storm in this country, we seem to see more and more power lines toppled by trees or other natural causes, and increasingly more and more consumers are out of power for considerable periods of time in this country, which is quite different now to areas in Europe and other sophisticated places such as the United States, where increasingly power is undergrounded and less susceptible to the elements. In terms of some of the other parts of this bill, the Fair Trading Amendment Bill includes false and misleading representation of goods and services. And again, so often now with goods being offered over the internet and by electronic means, we're not necessarily shopping physically and handling the goods. And so this does bring in a greater liability on the part of suppliers that they do not provide false or misleading representation about the goods. Also, unsolicited goods and services, that the responsibility lies with the supplier if any goods and services are supplied that are not asked for by the recipient. And again, the recipient has the right to return those if they are unsolicited. Also, in terms of contracts, this also tidies up some aspects of consumer contracts, where in the past there have been a proliferation of all sorts of variations on consumer contracts. And again, the law in the bill provides for tightening up of consumer contracts to ensure that consumers are not subject to unwarranted and perhaps dubious forms of contracts. Also, disclosure of trader status on the internet. Again, too often we don't know who the people are offering products on the internet. Often they are actually acting commercially, but put themselves up as private individuals, and again perhaps are moving goods through and not necessarily doing it for the right intent. Under these provisions of these bills, there will be a requirement to disclose in terms of trader status. Unsafe goods are covered under the bill as well, so that a greater certainty about goods that are provided and ensuring that they're not safe, that they are safe and not subject to any known problems with the goods when the person puts them on the internet or sells them through retail. It's also interesting to note that this bill includes the auctioneer's bill, which is a little bit out on a limb in terms of this whole thing. But in terms of auctioneering, there's increasingly all sorts of things being auctioned and sold via the auction method. And the auctioneer's bill, as a part of this, includes registration of auctioneers and tightening up of the aspects of auctioneers and how they can be struck off and removed as auctioneers if they're not meeting the required standards. Also a requirement for auction records to be kept by auctioneers for a period of 3 years to ensure that the records are obtainable and can be audited to ensure that the auctions were conducted correctly. And it also includes aspects of vendor bidding, and increasingly we're seeing more and more vendor bidding in many auctions, and again this bill tightens up areas of that so that vendor bidding must be disclosed and must be known to those who are participating, particularly if vendors are bidding prior to any reserve being reached in the case of a property auction. Again, these are all sensible things to bring into legislation. It tightens up a great many areas, and if you look at all the bills, there's a huge number. I've only mentioned a number of aspects of these various bills, but it's all to do with protecting the consumer, providing greater protection in terms of their rights, ensuring that New Zealand residents and citizens are given far greater protection, and that increasingly we're not being ripped off in our daily lives by unscrupulous traders, vendors and others who would gladly take their money off you. So in this respect, New Zealand First stands by this. As we've said time and time again in this Parliament, we're a party that stands by policy and good policy that supports New Zealanders, and in this case we see nothing at all wrong with any of the aspects of these bills. These are in support of good New Zealanders who are wanting to live a law-abiding lifestyle and be protected by the government of this country. Therefore, New Zealand First will be supporting it.
Kanwal Bakshi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.